It's time to visit another South London station. It's time for Clockhouse. See, a while back I visited the abandoned station at Woodside, and a few people pointed out that it looks almost identical to Clockhouse. So I thought I'd go and see for myself. Clockhouse is a station in southeast London on the line from Charing Cross to Hayes. It has at various times been known as Clock House, 2 words, or Clockhouse, 1 word. Sometimes it's been both. It seems to be generally agreed upon that 2 words is the correct way. It takes its name from a nearby house that was known as the Clock House, but was demolished in 1896. This block now stands on the site. The line was opened in 1864, but at that point the station did not yet exist. The line is known as the Mid-Kent Line, even though it is not in Kent. The line was operated by the South Eastern Railway and was part of that whole crazy tangle of tracks in southeast London, built as a result of different railway companies trying to increase their territory as much as possible, regardless of whether it actually made sense. Now, that is a bit of an oversimplification, but it gives you a rough idea of what was going on. Locals were requesting a station from the late 1870s onwards, and the growth of the suburbs in the area gave the South Eastern Railway reason to consider the proposal. They planned a station which was originally to be named Penge Road, but would become Clockhouse. On the 1st of June 1890 the new station was opened. It was, indeed, remarkably similar to Woodside Station. The same style of building was used at Elmer's End as well, but sadly none of that one survives. Like most stations of the time, Clockhouse was equipped with a goods yard, and it also had its own signal box. It seemed that the South Eastern had been right to listen to the locals' requests, because the station was a popular one from the start. Which was more than you could say for a lot of the stations around here. But what's really important is that there was a station master in the early years named Traitor Reynolds. And that's a name with a story, isn't it? I mean, I can't think of any good reason why you would name your child Traitor. Hello, this is me from the edit. It turns out that Traitor is a misprint and the station master was actually called Traiton, which is disappointing. Well, I'm not rewriting the script now, it's nearly midnight. Unfortunately, the post of station master at Clockhouse would only last until 1921. See, while Clockhouse was doing well enough, the same could not be said of the rest of the South Eastern Railway's network. Basically, the issue was that the South Eastern Railway was locked in a rivalry with the London and South Western Railway, the London Brighton and South Coast Railway, and the London Chatham and Dover Railway. Now, if they had to, they could get along with the London Brighton and South Coast and the London and South Western, but they absolutely could not abide those Dover boys.
Confound those Dover boys! Oh, how I hate them!
And the feeling was mutual. Each one spent a fortune trying to drive the other out of business. The punchline was, they both succeeded, and ended up joining forces in 1899 to prevent themselves from going under. They formed a new company called the South Eastern and Chatham Railway. The mess of railways in South London resulted in bottlenecks forming on the main lines into central London, with the result that the service to stations like Clockhouse was, well, it could have been better. The South Eastern and Chatham were hamstrung by the fact that, even working together, they were not rich. They considered the idea of electrification, but by the time they got around to appointing an engineer, the First World War had happened and they were even poorer. The cost of labour had gone up, and so the South Eastern and Chatham's solution was to get rid of a lot of their staff. Clockhouse, as well as Kent House and New Beckenham, were to be controlled from Beckenham Junction. I don't know if Mr. Reynolds was still working there, but if he was, I bet it wasn't just his mum who was yelling traitor. Actually, a lot of the railways were poorer than they used to be, and that's why in 1921 it was announced that the railways of Great Britain were to be grouped together into 4 major companies, which gave the SECR another reason not to spend money on improving things. All 4 of the companies that had been duking it out in South London would fall under the Southern Railway in 1923, and so too would Clockhouse. The Southern Railway considered electrification of their suburban lines to be a priority. The London and South Western Railway had had a lot of experience in electrification, and so their system was the one adopted by the Southern. The line through Clock House was electrified in 1926, although the general strike that year, a shortage of rolling stock and problems with power supply did rather hold things up. The Second World War was a hair-raising time for Clock House. On the 21st of June 1944, a V-1 flying bomb partially destroyed the booking office. A few days later, on the 2nd of August, another bomb landed nearby, killing 42 people. Services had been reduced during the war, and they weren't fully restored afterwards. Nationalisation occurred in 1948, but if locals thought that would mean a bright future for their railway, they were mistaken. Services were, in fact, cut back. But Clock House did see some positive changes, reflecting the fact that it was still a well-used station. The platforms were extended in 1962, and colour light signalling, the first on that line, was installed. At the same time, the signal box that had formerly been sited there was demolished. In 1963, goods trains stopped serving the station. In 1965, the same year that British Rail debuted their exciting new corporate image, Clock House had its staff numbers reduced even further, to the point where they could only have one exit open. I don't know, sometimes it seems like whatever was happening elsewhere on the line, they decided Clock House should do the opposite. The station faced another problem in 1965, which was flooding. Chaffinch Brook, next to the station, had a tendency to flood. But from 1965, nearby council works caused the problems to worsen, resulting in frequent closures of the line through Clock House. Actually, the problem got so bad that the divisional manager wrote a long letter to passengers explaining exactly what was happening, what emergency measures were in place, and exactly how difficult it was to make emergency arrangements. I guess he wasn't much of a one for management speak and euphemisms. In any case, British Rail kept at the local authorities until they fixed the problem in 1968. Also in 1968, a new underground line, known as the Fleet Line, was in the planning stages. One of the intended functions of this was to revitalise East and South East London, and among the possible routes suggested was one that would go to Lewisham. From there, tube trains would run over the main line all the way to Hayes, which would have put Clock House on the tube map. As it happened, there was no money to build the Fleet Line as originally intended. It was opened as the Jubilee Line in 1979, and when it finally got to South East London in 1999, it wouldn't go anywhere near Clock House. But that wasn't the last time the Underground would come sniffing around. In 1986, the line saw a resurgence in popularity, for two reasons. One was nothing to do with trains. It was the deregulation of the stock market, the so-called Big Bang. Suddenly, the leafier suburbs of southeast London became popular with city traders, and those folks travelled to work by train. The other innovation was something called Network South East. Essentially, this was a sprucing up of the commuter railways in London and the South East to provide a better, more attractive service. And it worked. Passenger numbers rose. But for poor old Clock House, that meant rationalisation, by which I mean they demolished the canopy on the down platform and cut back the one on the up platform, which left comparatively little shelter for the unfortunate passengers. In 1996, the line was privatised, with services falling under Connex South Eastern. Then it turned out that Connex South Eastern weren't very good at financial management, and in 2003 the service was handed over to South Eastern Trains. And then, in 2005, they were handed over from South Eastern to Southeastern. The second one is one word. A little bit like that business with Clock House and Clock House that I mentioned at the beginning. Anyway, a feature I'll draw your attention to is this iron railing, where you can trace the different operators through the layers of paint. The green is British Railway's southern region, the red is Network South East, the yellow is Connex, and the blue is South Eastern. The future may hold another operator. At present, much is being made of the concept of extending the London Underground's Bakerloo line in a southeasterly direction. If/when this is completed, it will run to Lewisham. And from Lewisham, the next step planned is to run trains over the line to Hayes, which, again, will include Clock House. This will require the station to be rebuilt somewhat to accommodate step-free access. However, TfL is currently proceeding cautiously with such plans, and I think it's something that should definitely be considered an if idea, not a when idea. Clockhouse's history hasn't been as eventful as some stations in the area. It started out popular, and on the whole it stayed popular, even while other stations did not. Nevertheless, Clockhouse has seen its share of interesting times. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please do consider leaving a like and perhaps subscribing for more. My main source for this was Andrew Hajduki's The Railways of Beckenham, and I really hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Apologies if not. I would like, as I so often do, to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your support. You are the station canopy to my rainy day. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.